Hello there! Welcome to Devlog number 1. In this series, I will be bringing you along as I develop my first game to completion. This project is going to be a small mobile game which, in short, is just a bouncy ball with some physics. It will only consist of 1 or 2 buttons with some simple mechanics, maybe like 6 power-ups, and that's pretty much it. Of course, as usual, it's always easier said than done. New ideas come up and old ideas change as you progress. For a little bit of background, I'm fairly new to game development. I started learning C# and Unity in the last month and a half or so ago. I had played around with Unity back in freshman year, but I never got too deep into it, and that was 6 years ago, so that doesn't really count. I've started 3 games. The first was going to be a hero's journey with some RPG elements. The second was going to be a boiled down version of Factorio mixed with a little bit of SimAnt, and the last was using the same base as the second and was going to be a city management game. These were all only ideas though, and I never actually got to making the meat of the gameplay. I was not starting small. I knew I wasn't on the first game, but on the second and third I tried boiling down my ideas, but the fact of the matter is I was still trying to make games that I wanted. I couldn't really come up with any actually small game ideas, so I did some research. I didn't want to build a platformer because, well, how am I going to stand out of the crowd with only 3 or 4 months of development time and, levels, lots and lots of levels. Puzzle games just don't sound that fun to make. If I make a management game, I want it to be on the scale of Factorio, and I never really enjoyed infinite runner games. But I really like this game called Leap On. It's simple, easy to pick up, and exciting. I knew I wanted to make something similar to Leap On, but found it hard to think of something that would be fun with only a bare minimum idea. After a few days, I came up with this. A ball and some platforms spread out in a circle which you can rotate. I know, groundbreaking idea. These platform objects are children of this parent object which holds a list of the platforms, and the parent is the object that we actually rotate, so all of its children will follow as we move it around. Once I had that down, I made a script to randomly select some of the platforms at random time intervals and move them at a random speed around the circle. Then I made a power-up system which spawns a random power-up object inside the ring. For the power-ups, the first was pretty obvious to me, add an additional ball to the scene. The second spawned some longer platforms to make it a bit easier to stay alive, and the third is called Saving Grace, a power-up which doesn't act immediately, and instead you hold on to them until they're triggered by your ball falling out of bounds. At this point, it seemed fitting to add another ring of platforms just to save you from time to time. This added a little bit of spice, but now I was at a loss of what else to add, so I reached out for some feedback. Someone said I should make the platforms get destroyed when you bounce off of them, kinda like a brick breaker game. I wasn't so sure about this, but I added it anyway to see what would come from it. I made some sprites and a simple script for the platforms which hold a health value and changes the sprite according to the health. Now initially, the game was going to be an infinite scoring game. You just keep your ball on the screen for as long as you can, racking up points in the process, but now that the platforms get destroyed, either it could no longer be an infinite scoring game or it'd have to add a power-up which spawns a few fresh platforms. In the case of the latter, the player would be absolutely reliant on getting that power-up sooner or later, and there's not much fine control over the ball, so I decided to see what I could do to stray away from the infinite scoring idea. I played the game for a little while and realized it's pretty nice when you manage to hit a platform in the outer ring. This led me to another idea: destroy all of the outer platforms to win. It was a little too hard to do this when they took 6 hits and my ball kept falling out of bounds after hitting one, so I made it only take 1 hit, and after that the saving grace functionality is called. It just doesn't take away from your count. It was starting to come along at this point. I just needed to add more power-ups, change the scoring system, pretty it up some more, do a little bit of balancing, and find ways to make the game more impactful overall. I decided to go for impact and add some camera shakes and particles when you hit the objectives. After some time of playing around with the particle system, I got the explosion to look decent, but it didn't feel quite right, so I added another stage of explodey bits. The first one slows time to 1% speed and doesn't trigger the camera shake. This sort of charges up in anticipation, then after a set amount of time the real explosion happens, and the game continues as per usual. To wrap up everything I had done so far, I started on a win animation. It's nothing too fancy yet, but when you destroy the last objective, the camera and the ball fly up and away from everything else, and some particles are created at the top of the screen. I played around with a few variations of these particles, but just went with this. that's pretty much it for this video. If you liked it, drop a like, subscribe if you want to see more. I will be updating it every week-ish. It might end up being something more like every week and a half. Who knows? But yeah, that's it.